One late autumn night, the quiet atmosphere of a Tokyo apartment complex was suddenly shattered by desperate cries for help coming from behind a locked door. Inside the apartment, a young woman was frantically calling the police, while in the hallway outside, a young female international student lay collapsed in a pool of blood with fatal wounds. In an instant, the peaceful atmosphere had transformed into a haunting crime scene, triggering intense debates about humanity, responsibility, and justice, a case that shocked both Japan and China. What really happened behind that locked door? Join Crime Documentary Files as we explore this mysterious case. In the early morning hours of November 3, 2016, the Nakano District Police, a typically peaceful residential area in Tokyo, received 2 consecutive emergency calls from the same phone number. From the other end of the line, the trembling voice of a panicked young woman reported an emergency situation. Notably, the dispatcher could clearly hear the woman shouting as if speaking to someone. "Lock the door, don't make trouble anymore." Immediately after came a blood-curdling scream, then the woman returned to the phone, her voice filled with panic. "My friend has collapsed, hurry up!" Recognizing the extremely urgent situation, police and ambulance units immediately rushed to the scene. The reported location was on the 2nd floor of an apartment building. Upon arrival, police witnessed a horrifying scene. A young woman lying unconscious on the floor, blood still flowing from stab wounds to her neck. The subsequent autopsy report revealed that the victim had been stabbed over 10 times, including one penetrating wound to the neck that was 3 to 4 inches deep, completely severing the left carotid artery. The murder weapon, a fruit knife approximately 3.5 to 4 inches long, was found next to the body. Scattered throughout the hallway were various objects thrown about and chaotic footprints, evidence of the fierce struggle that had just taken place. Particularly notable was that the victim had collapsed right next to the apartment door, and her position suggested she was trying to find a way into the house to escape when she was blocked by the attacker. Despite being rushed to the hospital in critical condition due to the severity of her wounds, the young woman did not survive the ambulance ride. At the scene, when police knocked on the apartment door, the very place where the victim was attacked right at the threshold, they discovered there was still someone inside. What was concerning was that this woman appeared extremely frightened, continuously shouting words of dismissal as if she was still afraid someone was lurking outside. The investigators had to patiently calm and persuade her for quite some time before she had enough courage to open the door and step outside. Evidence collected from the scene led police to lean toward the theory that this was a murder stemming from personal motives, possibly harboring deep hatred. The method of attack showed uncontrollable rage, and it was highly likely that the victim and the perpetrator had a prior relationship. After her mental state stabilized, the woman in the apartment confirmed her name as Liu Xin and identified the victim as Jiang, her close friend. Both had been living together in this apartment, and the last person to appear with Jiang at the scene was Chen Shifeng, Liu's ex-boyfriend. Through tears, Liu recounted that he had secretly followed the 2 women home that fateful night, and then committed the murder. This information immediately helped Tokyo police narrow their investigation and identify the main suspect. At the scene, besides the murder weapon, investigators also discovered a whiskey bottle left in the stairwell between the 2nd and 3rd floors. Through fingerprint analysis, this bottle was confirmed to belong to Shifeng, indicating he had planned to ambush them beforehand in the shadows, sipping alcohol while patiently waiting for the right moment to act. All evidence pointed to a clear conclusion. This was not a sudden or random attack, but a carefully calculated murder stemming from deep personal emotional conflicts. When she received the devastating news of her daughter's death, Jiang Lian, Jiang Ge's mother, was completely devastated. She couldn't believe what she had just heard. This profound grief became the beginning of a long and difficult journey for a mother seeking justice for her lost child. According to personal records, the victim in this case was Jiang Ge, a 24-year-old Chinese citizen and the only daughter of Jiang Lian. She was born and raised in Qingdao. Those who knew her described Jiang Ge as an energetic young woman with a kind heart, who was especially devoted to her family. In April 2016, she had decided to study abroad in Japan, pursuing a master's degree in linguistics at a university in Tokyo. In the eyes of her friends, Jiang stood out for her strong independence and willingness to help anyone in need. However, ironically, it was this very kindness that led her to her tragic fate. About 2 months before the tragedy occurred, Jiang had agreed to let Liu Xin, a friend from the same hometown, temporarily stay at her apartment in Tokyo. The reason Liu Xin needed a place to hide was because she was trying to escape the surveillance and harassment of her ex-boyfriend, who had pathologically jealous tendencies, and Jiang, with her compassionate heart, did not hesitate to help her friend in need. Throughout their time living together, Jiang proved to be a truly devoted friend. She not only regularly comforted and encouraged Liu Xin whenever she showed signs of worry, but also repeatedly served as a mediator to resolve conflicts whenever Shifeng, Liu's ex-boyfriend, appeared to cause trouble. Regarding her family background, Jiang grew up in a family where her parents divorced when she was young. From then on, she lived only with her mother. For Jiang, studying abroad was not only an opportunity to change her life, but also a way to show filial piety to the mother who had worked hard to raise her. To realize this dream, in addition to her time studying at school, Jiang worked various part-time jobs to cover tuition and living expenses, while also sending money home to help her mother. And on that fateful evening, while concentrating on her studies at school, Jiang suddenly received a distress message from Liu Xin, who was in a state of extreme panic. Without a second's hesitation, Jiang immediately went to pick up her friend and bring her home safely. Little did she know that this beautiful act and sincere friendship would lead her to tragedy. As soon as they received the case report, Tokyo police quickly mobilized a specialized investigation team from the Nakano District Police Station to clarify the incident. Based on initial statements from Liu Xin, the investigation team was able to identify the main suspect, Chen Shifeng, a 25-year-old Chinese citizen who was an international student in Japan, and Liu Xin's ex-boyfriend. However, immediately after committing the crime, Shifeng had quickly fled the scene, forcing police to urgently deploy a large-scale manhunt throughout Tokyo. Fortunately, after just 4 days, on November 7, 2016, security forces successfully apprehended the suspect. Notably, Shifeng was not directly arrested on murder charges as police still needed time to gather sufficient legal evidence. Instead, he was detained on charges of threatening to kill, based on threatening messages that Shifeng had sent to Liu Xin. This tactic created the necessary legal basis for authorities to hold the suspect in custody while continuing the investigation and evidence collection process for the more serious charge of premeditated murder. However, an unexpected development occurred. On November 8th, when Japanese media reported the arrest of the suspect, Liu Xin made statements that surprised public opinion. She insisted to the press that she had not seen the perpetrator at all and had no clues related to the case. This distant attitude was further demonstrated when she continuously avoided Jiang Qiulian, Jiang's grieving mother, for an extended period. These actions sparked strong waves of indignation from Chinese public opinion. The public harshly criticized Liu Xin, believing she was deliberately evading moral responsibility and lacking cooperation in seeking the truth for the friend who had died because of her. However, during closed sessions with investigators, Liu Xin revealed important information. She admitted that on the afternoon of November 2nd, when Shifeng came to cause trouble, Jiang had intended to call the police to resolve the situation. But Liu Xin had intervened, worried that if their cohabitation was discovered, it would violate the rental agreement and cause unnecessary trouble with the landlord. Additionally, she didn't want to make the matter into a big issue. Liu Xin also confessed that on the night of the tragedy, due to extreme fear of being stalked by her ex-boyfriend, she had proactively sent a message asking Jiang to come home with her. A particularly noteworthy detail was Liu Xin's assertion in her statement that she had not heard the doorbell at all and had not locked the apartment door in the final minutes before Jiang was attacked. However, this denial completely contradicted the audio evidence police had collected. In the recording of the emergency call to police, Liu Xin's voice could be clearly heard from inside the room, shouting, "The door is already locked," and continuously demanding that Shifeng stop his actions. Immediately after these words, the audio captured Jiang's agonizing screams from the hallway outside. This audio evidence irrefutably confirmed that the door had indeed been locked tight by Liu Xin from the inside. Liu Xin's denial of this action could have two explanations. Either the psychological shock was so great that she couldn't accurately remember what she had done in that moment of extreme panic, or she was deliberately concealing the truth to reduce the moral burden she had to bear. Simultaneously, the investigation team meticulously reviewed security camera systems throughout the area around the apartment building and tracked Shifeng's movements in the hours before the crime. Video footage extracted from surveillance systems revealed a clear picture of the suspect's plan. On the evening of November 2nd, 2016, Shifeng had stopped at a convenience store near where Jiang lived to buy a bottle of whiskey, then secretly entered the building and hid in the stairwell area. Through scientific analysis of the crime scene, police collected Shifeng's fingerprints and DNA samples found on both the bottle and the knife, believed to be the murder weapon. Beyond that, examination of telecommunications data showed that Shifeng had been tracking and monitoring Liu Xin's whereabouts for an extended period before committing the crime. Electronic evidence showed that Shifeng had continuously attacked Liu Xin with threatening messages and calls. Particularly alarming was the final message sent on the evening of November 2nd, just hours before the crime, in which he declared he would use any means necessary to achieve his goals. This chilling threat perfectly aligned temporally with Shifeng's preparation of weapons and execution of his ambush outside the apartment. On November 22, 2016, having gathered sufficient convincing evidence, Tokyo police officially issued an arrest warrant for Shifeng on charges of premeditated murder. Throughout the interrogation process, Shifeng not only gave false statements to deny the charges, but also tried to blame others involved. Due to the complex nature of the case and the need for cross-border verification, Japanese police requested cooperation from Chinese authorities to clarify the backgrounds of the individuals involved in the case. Investigation results showed that Shifeng, born in 1991, was a Chinese international student studying in Japan. He came from a middle-class family in China and had self-funded his studies in Japan. At the time of the crime, Shifeng was pursuing postgraduate studies at a university in Tokyo. During his life and studies in Japan, Shifeng had met and developed a romantic relationship with Liu Xin. However, as the relationship became more serious, he began to reveal concerning personality traits, a tendency to excessively control his girlfriend, frequent displays of jealousy, and hot-tempered reactions that were difficult to control. After a series of increasingly frequent arguments and disagreements, in the fall of 2016, Liu Xin was forced to make the decision to end the relationship. From the time of their breakup onward, Shifeng revealed his true nature completely. He could not accept the end of the relationship and began to continuously threaten and harass Liu Xin. In his most serious threats, Shifeng even threatened to publicly release Liu Xin's private photos to her family if she refused to return to him. Additionally, Shifeng was described as very intelligent, but with concerning psychological abnormalities. His personal record showed he had no prior criminal history and had not been diagnosed with mental illness. However, his blind and unhealthy possessive psychology had caused him to completely lose self-control, leading to behaviors that crossed all legal boundaries. What was particularly noteworthy was that Jiang and Shifeng initially had no personal conflicts or disputes whatsoever. In fact, both had normal social interactions without anything controversial. However, in Shifeng's mind, Jiang had become a target of hatred simply because she had dared to stand up to protect and help Liu Xin escape his harassment. Some information from mutual friends revealed that Shifeng had publicly blamed Jiang, accusing her of manipulating and inciting Liu Xin to leave him. However, the truth was completely opposite. Jiang had simply stood up to help a friend in need who required protection. The motive driving Shifeng to commit the crime was clearly rooted in deep hatred and desire for emotional revenge. He harbored resentment not only toward his ex-girlfriend, but also toward the friend who had courageously stood up to protect her. His determination to act was a way to release the jealous rage and hatred he had nurtured in his heart. Throughout this process, Shifeng's family seemed completely powerless, or may have chosen to avoid involvement, showing no intervention or action whatsoever. This was clearly demonstrated through the painful words of Jiang's mother, who stated that from the time of the crime until now, she had never received even a single apology or expression of remorse from the family of her daughter's killer. The case file was quickly completed and transferred to the Tokyo prosecutor's office in December 2016. On October 14, 2017, the Tokyo District Prosecutor's Office formally indicted Shifeng on 2 serious charges: threatening to kill and intentional murder. Although the investigation process had concluded and the perpetrator's identity had been clearly established, intense debates surrounding the role and responsibility of Liu Xin, the sole survivor of the case, were just beginning to explode. To gain a more comprehensive view of what transpired on that fateful night, let's turn back time to the early days of November 2016. On November 2nd, 2016, Shifeng had come to Jiang's apartment, where Liu Xin was temporarily staying. He rang the doorbell and began causing trouble, demanding to see Liu Xin to discuss their breakup. Liu Xin, in a state of extreme panic, did not dare open the door and hurriedly sent a distress message to Jiang, who was away on business. Upon receiving the emergency report, Jiang immediately called to instruct Liu Xin to lock the door tight and initially intended to call the police to handle the situation. However, Liu Xin had prevented this decision, fearing that their cohabitation would be discovered, violating the rental agreement, and she also didn't want to make the issue a big deal. Respecting her friend's opinion, Jiang agreed not to contact police and instead quickly left school to return home. Around 4 p.m., she arrived at the apartment and directly served as a mediator, patiently persuading Shifeng to leave. Faced with Jiang's gentle attitude and persuasion, Shifeng finally agreed to go. However, his eyes as he left still radiated anger and hatred that could hardly be contained. Shortly after, Jiang had to go to school for evening classes. Before leaving home, she instructed Liu Xin to be extremely careful and vigilant. However, what both women didn't know was that Shifeng had not given up his intentions. He had secretly followed and stalked Liu Xin, apparently having prepared an ambush plan around this area beforehand. When evening came, Liu Xin had to work a part-time shift at a restaurant to earn extra income. Shifeng took advantage of this opportunity to follow her from a distance and began a campaign of harassment via phone. He continuously bombarded Liu Xin with threatening messages and psychological pressure. Not stopping at ordinary hostile words, Shifeng escalated the level of threats by warning he would publicly release Liu Xin's private photos to her family if she continued to refuse to meet. Faced with this terrible pressure, Liu Xin in her panic came up with a temporary plan. She asked a male colleague at the restaurant to pretend to be her new boyfriend to deal with Shifeng. The confrontation took place in a tense and brief atmosphere. In front of Shifeng, Liu Xin showed a resolute attitude, asserting that she had a new relationship and absolutely refused any possibility of reconciliation. Feeling humiliated in front of others, Shifeng erupted in uncontrollable fury. He smashed his phone and left the scene, but not before leaving a malicious and chilling warning that he would be ready to use any means necessary to achieve his goals. Around 7 p.m. that same day, Shifeng returned to his lodgings to prepare for a revenge plan that had been brewing in his mind. He carefully hid a fruit knife approximately 3.7 inches long in his clothing, while also preparing a clean set of spare clothes to change into in case he got bloodstained. Additionally, he brought along a bottle of whiskey he had purchased from a store near where Jiang lived. That night, around 11 p.m., Liu Xin finished her work shift and sent a message to Jiang reporting that she was at the train station near home, but felt very worried because she feared Shifeng might still be lurking somewhere around the area. Upon receiving this message, Jiang, without a moment's hesitation, immediately boarded the next train to pick up her friend and bring her home safely. Throughout the journey, she continued sending messages to check on the situation and reassure Liu Xin. Around midnight, Jiang and Liu Xin met at the train station and returned together to the apartment on the second floor. Both women walked in a state of anxiety and apprehension, completely unaware that Shifeng had already secretly infiltrated the building and had been lying in wait in the stairwell between the second and third floors. For several hours, he had sat silently in the darkness, occasionally sipping whiskey to stay warm and strengthen his resolve, while his mind was filled only with thoughts of hatred. When Jiang Ge and Liu Xin entered the dark hallway, Liu Xin went first with Jiang Ge following behind, as she planned to escort her friend to the door before returning to school to continue studying. Just as they approached the apartment door, Liu Xin suddenly felt an inexplicable sense of unease. At that moment, from the dark area of the stairwell, Shifeng lunged out like a wild beast, knife gleaming in his hand, blocking the entrance to the home. Suddenly confronted by the assailant, Jiang Ge cried out in horror. It seemed that in natural reflex she tried to rush forward to protect and shield her friend. Meanwhile, Liu Xin, following survival instinct, hurriedly opened the door and rushed straight inside the apartment, then immediately locked the door tight. In that brief moment, this decision sealed Jiang Ge's fate. Left alone in the narrow hallway, the 24-year-old woman had just turned around when she found herself face to face with the crazed killer. In the pitch-black space, Shifeng screamed and lunged into attack. Jiang Ge tried to resist desperately, her cries of pain ringing out before being swallowed by the chaotic sounds of the death struggle. Shifeng frantically attacked with fatal knife strikes, causing Jiang Ge's blood to flow continuously. She collapsed right in front of the door, her entire body soaked in blood. Traces on the tightly closed door showed that in her final moments, she had desperately knocked on the door calling for help in vain. Inside the apartment, Liu Xin had huddled in a corner of the room, completely stunned and silent before the horrifying sounds occurring right outside in the hallway. After a few seconds of haunting silence, she tremblingly picked up the phone to call police. Despite knowing clearly that Jiang Ge was in critical danger right behind the door, Liu Xin still didn't have enough courage to open the door. Meanwhile, after carrying out the brutal attack, Shifeng quickly fled the scene upon hearing Liu Xin contacting police. Within less than 10 minutes, patrol cars and ambulances had arrived at the building. Jiang Ge was taken for emergency treatment in critical condition, but due to excessive blood loss and the severity of her wounds, she breathed her last breath on the way to the hospital. The Jiang Ge murder case was quickly transferred to Tokyo District Court and attracted widespread attention from public opinion, especially from the Chinese community living in Japan. The number of interested parties was so large that the court was forced to organize a lottery system to distribute entrance tickets, with only about 30 people ultimately allowed inside the courtroom. During the 7 days of trial lasting from October 11th to October 18th, 2017, many painful and controversial details were brought to light. In court, Shifeng displayed a frighteningly calm demeanor, almost cold. He admitted to having sent threatening messages to Liu Xin, but firmly denied the charge of premeditated murder. In his testimony, Shifeng claimed that Jiang Ge's death was merely an accident that occurred during a struggle, and he had no intention of killing anyone. However, the prosecution presented a convincing chain of evidence showing that Shifeng had a very clear plan to kill. From preparing a sharp knife in advance, bringing spare clothes, lying in ambush for hours, to the number of stab wounds reaching over 10 and all aimed at vital areas, everything indicated this was a carefully calculated act, rather than random. Prosecutors emphasized that the defendant's actions demonstrated an extremely high level of premeditation and cruelty. The prosecutor's representative also explained that under Japan's legal system, the crime of premeditated murder carries a sentence ranging from 5 years imprisonment to life, and even death penalty in particularly serious cases. However, for cases involving only one victim like this one, the highest sentence typically applied would be fixed-term imprisonment, or life. Based on the brutality of the act and the defendant's stubborn denial of guilt, the prosecution requested a 25-year prison sentence, the maximum fixed-term penalty under Japanese law. The trial also featured the appearance of key witness Liu Xin. Due to enormous public pressure, she didn't dare testify publicly, but only gave testimony via video from a private room. In her statement, Liu denied locking the door. She said she had gone into the room first to change clothes because she was menstruating, then only heard Jiang Ge's scream, and when she tried to run out, she discovered the door was blocked and couldn't be opened. However, when the jury asked, "If you didn't know what was happening, why did you call police saying you were in danger and being attacked?" Liu could not provide a reasonable explanation. At the trial, Jiang Ge's mother, Jiang Lian, was also present as the victim's representative. She brought a petition with 4.5 million signatures from Chinese communities worldwide, requesting the court to sentence Shifeng to death. Through tears, she affirmed that the defendant showed no remorse, and the victim's family had never received a single apology from his family. These choked words moved many present in the courtroom to tears. Despite this, Japanese lawyers emphasized that public opinion could not directly determine the verdict, but the judgment must be based on law and the specific circumstances of the case. After 6 days of public trial and 1 day of closed deliberation, on the afternoon of October 20th, 2017, Tokyo District Court declared defendant Shifeng guilty of intentional murder and threats, sentencing him to 25 years imprisonment. Notably, while the judge was presenting the verdict, Shifeng suddenly collapsed at the defendant's bench, his whole body convulsing, sweating profusely, tears streaming from his eyes. Many believed this was the moment he realized he had completely run out of ways to deny his guilt. A moment later, Shifeng regained consciousness to hear the complete 25-year prison sentence. Upon hearing the sentence, Jiang's mother hugged her daughter's portrait and burst into tears. She expressed disappointment with Japanese law and believed the killer could only truly appreciate the value of life if he paid with his own life. After the first instance trial, Shifeng appealed on December 22, 2017. However, just 1 week later, on December 29th, he suddenly withdrew his appeal. Perhaps Shifeng or his lawyer realized that with such clear evidence and pressure from public opinion, appealing would only prolong the process without likely changing the outcome. Therefore, the 25-year prison sentence officially took effect from early 2018. Shifeng was transferred to a Japanese prison to serve his sentence, expected to be incarcerated until 2043. Although the verdict had concluded, the Jiang case continued to haunt public opinion, becoming one of the most shocking cases of the 2010s. In China, the public was not only outraged with killer Shifeng, but also engaged in fierce debate about the moral responsibility of Liu Xin, the friend behind the locked door that night. On social media, hundreds of millions of comments exploded, most criticizing Liu as selfish and cold, even spreading her personal information, making threats and harassing her family. Under this tremendous pressure, Liu Xin had to change her name, relocate, avoid Jiang's mother, and has almost never publicly apologized. At the end of 2016, Liu opened a Weibo account that attracted 320,000 followers. She posted many articles attacking Jiang's mother, declaring that Jiang brought it on herself for letting her stay. However, shortly after, Liu Xin's account was permanently banned. And although not prosecuted by Japanese law, Liu Xin still had to face China's judicial system. In May 2019, Jiang Lian officially filed a lawsuit against Liu Xin in the People's Court of Chengyang District, Qingdao City, accusing her of violating the right to life by preventing Jiang from calling police, failing to warn of danger, and locking the door to abandon her friend. 3 months later, the first instance trial in February 2022 concluded that Liu Xin was at fault, ordering her to pay 696,000 RMB, approximately 100,000 US dollars, in compensation to the victim's mother. This verdict was supported by public opinion and seen as a victory for moral justice. Liu Xin subsequently filed an appeal, but by December 2022, the appellate court upheld the original judgment. Instead of complying with the verdict, Liu Xin also solicited donations to pay the debt, causing a fierce wave of opposition that resulted in her social media accounts being permanently blocked and the funds received being frozen. Faced with Liu Xin's hesitation, Jiang's mother had to request court enforcement, and by June 2023, she had received the full compensation amount. Notably, Jiang's mother donated the entire sum to establish the Jiang Scholarship Fund, helping disadvantaged students as a way to transform grief into humanitarian action. And that's the case for today. What are your thoughts on this case, especially regarding Liu Xin? Please share in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next videos.